The blood on Elena Zimmerman's hands never seemed to wash away, no matter how many times she scrubbed them raw under the pump outside the medical tent. She stood in Laramie, Wyoming in the spring of 1868, a full year after she had resigned her post as an Army nurse. Yet the phantom stains remained as vivid as the day she watched Private Thomas Sullivan bleed out on the operating table while she held his hand, and lied that everything would be fine. The war between the states had ended 3 years ago, but for Elena, age 26, the battles raged on inside her mind every single night. She had come to Laramie hoping the wild frontier would offer enough distance from her past, enough space between herself and the memories of field hospitals filled with dying boys who called for their mothers in their final moments. The town sat along the Union Pacific Railroad line, growing faster than weeds after a rainstorm, filled with railroad workers, cowboys, prospectors, and people running from something just like she was. Elena had opened a small medical practice in a cramped office above the general store, treating everything from bullet wounds to childhood fevers, broken bones to difficult births. The work kept her hands busy, but it did nothing to quiet the voices. She kept a journal with all their names. 47 soldiers had died under her care during the war, 47 men whose faces she could still see when she closed her eyes. Sometimes she would wake in the middle of the night, gasping for air, convinced she could smell the copper tang of blood and the sickly sweet stench of gangrene. Her landlady, Mrs. Peterson, had stopped asking if she was all right when she heard Elena pacing the floors at 3 in the morning. It was on one of those sleepless nights, just past midnight on a Tuesday in late April, that Elena dressed and walked down to the Empty Bottle Saloon, not for whiskey, but because the noise and light made her feel less alone. She sat at a corner table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, watching cowboys and railroad men play cards and tell lies about their adventures. That was when Quinn Irving walked through the door, and though Elena did not know it yet, everything was about to change. Quinn stood 6 feet tall with sun-darkened skin and hands that looked like they had never known a soft day of work. He wore a dust-covered hat, leather chaps over worn denim pants, and a blue shirt that had seen better days. His dark hair fell past his collar, and a few days of stubble shadowed his jaw. He was 28 years old, a ranch hand from a spread 30 miles north of town, and he moved through the crowded saloon with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. Elena watched him order a beer and lean against the bar, and she noticed something in his eyes that made her breath catch. They were kind eyes, yes, but also tired eyes. Eyes that had seen things. She did not mean to stare, but Quinn caught her looking and smiled. Not the cocky grin she had seen on so many men in this town, but something gentler, something that made her stomach flip in a way she had not felt in years. He picked up his beer and walked over to her table. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that somehow cut through the saloon noise without being loud. Elena gestured to the empty chair across from her. "It is a free country. That is what they tell me anyway." Quinn sat down and took a long drink of his beer. "You are the doc, right? The one who stitched up Pete Morrison after he got kicked by that mare last month?" "I am. Dr. Zimmerman. Though most people just call me the nurse lady, despite the fact that I have more medical training than any physician within 100 miles. She heard the bitterness in her own voice and winced. "Pete says you saved his leg, says any other doctor would have just cut it off. I have seen enough unnecessary amputations to last several lifetimes," Elena said quietly. "I do not take limbs unless there is absolutely no other choice." Something passed over Quinn's face, a shadow of pain or memory. "You were in the war." It was not a question, and Elena found she did not want to lie to this stranger with the kind, tired eyes. Yes, I was a nurse with the Union Army. I served in field hospitals in Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. I saw Gettysburg. I saw Antietam. I saw things that I wish I could forget. Quinn nodded slowly. I rode with the cavalry for 2 years, enlisted in '63 when I turned 21, fought in Tennessee and Georgia. I got discharged after taking a bullet in the shoulder at the Battle of Nashville. He rotated his left arm as if to demonstrate, and Elena noticed the slight hitch in the movement. Does it still give you trouble? Only when it rains, or when I am trying to rope a steer, or when I sleep on it wrong. So, most of the time. He smiled, and this time there was a hint of humor in it. The doc who patched me up did a decent job, but I think you might have done better. They talked until the saloon closed at 2 in the morning, and Elena realized with a start that it was the first real conversation she had enjoyed in months. Quinn told her about the ranch where he worked, about the spring cattle drive they had just completed, about the way the prairie looked when the sun rose over the grasslands. She told him about her childhood in Philadelphia, about studying medicine with her physician father who had believed women were just as capable as men in the healing arts, about the decision to volunteer as a nurse when the war broke out. What she did not tell him, what she could not yet put into words, was about the weight she carried, the names in her journal, the faces that haunted her, the way she sometimes froze in the middle of treating a patient because a particular wound or cry of pain would transport her back to those blood-soaked hospital tents. When they finally walked out into the cool night air, Quinn offered to escort her home. They walked in comfortable silence through the darkened streets of Laramie, their boots echoing on the wooden boardwalks. At her door, he tipped his hat. I enjoyed talking with you, Dr. Zimmerman. Elena. You can call me Elena. Elena. He said her name like it was something precious. I hope I will see you again. I hope so too. She watched him walk away, his tall figure disappearing into the darkness, and for the first time in a long time, she went to bed without dreading the dreams that would come. Quinn started finding excuses to come into town more often. He would stop by Elena's office with a cut that needed bandaging, or to ask her opinion on a ranch hand's persistent cough, or simply to bring her fresh eggs from the ranch chickens. Elena found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that both thrilled and frightened her. She had been alone for so long, had convinced herself that she was too damaged for anything resembling happiness. But Quinn's steady presence began to chip away at the walls she had built. One afternoon in early May, Elena was treating a young boy who had broken his arm falling from a tree when she heard shouting in the street. She finished splinting the arm and sent the boy home with his mother, then stepped outside to see what the commotion was about. A crowd had gathered near the railroad depot, and she could hear a woman screaming. Elena grabbed her medical bag and ran toward the sound. She pushed through the crowd to find a man lying on the ground, his leg crushed beneath a fallen stack of railroad ties. Blood pooled beneath him, and his face had gone white with shock. The woman screaming was his wife, being held back by 2 other women. Elena dropped to her knees beside the injured man and immediately assessed the damage. The leg was mangled beyond repair, the femoral artery likely severed. She had seen this injury before, dozens of times, in field hospitals where artillery shells had torn through flesh and bone. Her hands began to shake. "Somebody get me clean water and whiskey," she called out, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "I need bandages, lots of bandages." But her hands would not stop shaking. The world began to tilt and blur around the edges. Suddenly, she was not in Laramie anymore, but in a hospital tent outside Gettysburg, And the man on the ground was not a railroad worker but Private Sullivan, and she was losing him just like she had lost all the others. Elena. A calm voice cut through the roaring in her ears. Strong hands gripped her shoulders. Elena, look at me. She blinked and found herself staring into Quinn's face. He must have been in town, must have heard the commotion. His dark eyes were steady and focused. You can do this, he said quietly so only she could hear. I know you can. I have seen you work. You are the best doctor this town has, and this man needs you right now, not 5 minutes from now, right now. Elena sucked in a breath and forced herself to focus. The shaking in her hands began to subside. She nodded once, and Quinn released her shoulders but stayed close, kneeling beside her. I need you to help me, she told him. Tell me what to do. For the next 30 minutes, Elena worked with Quinn as her assistant, giving him clear, precise instructions as she fought to save the railroad worker's life. Quinn never hesitated, never flinched, even when she told him to hold the man down while she set about the grim work of amputating the crushed leg. He followed her orders exactly, keeping his voice calm and reassuring to the injured man, even as Elena cut through muscle and bone, and tied off blood vessels with practiced efficiency. When it was done, when the man had been loaded onto a wagon and taken to his home where Elena would check on him later, she stood in the street covered in blood and realized she was shaking again. Quinn took her arm and guided her away from the crowd, around the corner to a quiet alley. I almost could not do it, Elena whispered. I froze. In all my years of practice, I have never frozen like that. But you did do it. You saved that man's life. Only because you were there. She looked up at him, and something broke open inside her chest. I carry them with me, Quinn. All of them. Every soldier I lost during the war, I have their names written in a journal, 47 names. Sometimes I think the weight of them is going to crush me. Quinn's face softened with understanding. How long have you been carrying that alone since the war ended? 3 years. No longer. Since the first one died, a boy from Massachusetts who took a mini ball to the chest. He was 19 years old. I held his hand while he died, and I have been holding all of them ever since. Elena. Quinn reached out and gently cupped her face with one calloused hand. You cannot carry that weight by yourself. It is too much for any one person. I do not know how to put it down. Then let me help you. She stared at him, this cowboy who had appeared in her life just a few weeks ago, and saw something in his eyes that made her want to believe. Not just kindness, but recognition. He understood. He had his own ghosts, his own battles that still raged in the dark hours of the night. I do not know if I can be fixed, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe neither of us can be fixed. But maybe we do not have to carry our burdens alone anymore. Elena leaned into his hand, and for the first time in 3 years, she let herself cry. Not silent tears, but great shaking sobs that tore from her chest and left her gasping. Quinn pulled her against him, wrapping his strong arms around her and holding her while she wept for all the men she could not save, for all the broken boys who had died calling for home, for the innocence she had lost somewhere between Gettysburg and now. When the storm finally passed, Elena pulled back and wiped her eyes. I am sorry. That was not very professional of me. Being professional is overrated. Quinn's voice was gentle. Being human matters more. They stood in that alley for a long time, not speaking, just existing in each other's presence. Finally, Quinn said, Will you have dinner with me tomorrow night? Not at the saloon, something nicer. I want to court you properly, Elena Zimmerman, if you will let me. Elena felt a smile tug at her lips, small but genuine. I would like that very much. The next evening, Quinn arrived at her door wearing a clean shirt and with his hair still damp from washing. He took her to the best restaurant Laramie had to offer, a small establishment run by a Chinese couple who served the most incredible food Elena had ever tasted. They talked for hours, and this time, Elena found herself able to speak about her experiences during the war without feeling like she was drowning. Quinn shared his own stories about the cavalry charges and the friends he had lost, about the bullet wound that still ached and the nightmares that sometimes woke him. They discovered they both dreaded thunderstorms because the sound reminded them of artillery fire. They both had trouble with crowds sometimes, feeling overwhelmed and trapped. They both understood what it meant to smile and function in daily life while carrying an invisible weight that never quite went away. "I thought I was the only one who felt this way," Elena admitted as they walked home under a sky full of stars. "You are not alone," Quinn said. "I think there are more of us than anyone wants to admit. We just do not talk about it. Why are you talking about it with me?" He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Because when I look at you, I see someone who understands, and because I have not felt this way about anyone in a very long time. Maybe never." Elena's heart hammered in her chest. "What way?" "Like maybe there is still something good left in this world worth holding on to." She reached up and touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingers. "I feel the same way." Quinn leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, but Elena rose on her toes to meet him. Their lips came together in a kiss that was gentle and searching, tentative at first and then deeper as they both leaned into it. When they finally broke apart, Elena was breathless. "Stay with me tonight," she whispered. "Just to sleep. Just to hold each other. I do not want to be alone. Neither do I." They climbed the stairs to her room above the general store, and for the first time since the war ended, Elena fell asleep in someone's arms and did not dream of blood and death. She dreamed, instead of open prairies and sunrise, of strong hands and kind eyes, of a future that might hold something other than grief. Over the following weeks, Quinn and Elena became inseparable. He would ride into town whenever his ranch duties allowed, and on days when she could leave her practice, she would ride out to visit him. He taught her how to sit a horse properly, how to read the weather in the clouds, how to find peace in the vast silence of the Wyoming wilderness. She taught him about wound care and infection prevention, about the latest medical advances she read about in her journals, about poetry and literature, and all the things she had loved before the war tried to break her. But more importantly, they taught each other how to begin healing. Quinn introduced Elena to other veterans who lived in and around Laramie, men who had fought for both sides of the war and were now trying to build new lives in the West. They gathered sometimes at the ranch where Quinn worked, sitting around a campfire and sharing stories that only other soldiers would understand. Elena listened and contributed her own experiences, and found that speaking the names of the men she had lost out loud somehow made them weigh a little less. She brought her journal one night, the one with all 47 names, and read them aloud to the group. No one interrupted. No one told her to move on or forget. They just listened, and when she finished, an older man who had fought at Shiloh said, "They are not forgotten, not as long as we remember them." Quinn held her hand through it all, and afterward, when everyone else had gone to bed and they sat alone under the stars, he said, "I am proud of you." "For what?" "For being brave enough to share that, for trusting us with their names." Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. "I still carry them, but it feels different now, like the weight is distributed somehow." That is what people are supposed to do, carry things together. In June, a letter arrived for Elena from Philadelphia. Her father had died peacefully in his sleep. She read the news in her office and sat very still for a long time, feeling nothing at first, and then everything at once. Her father had been the one person who believed in her, who had trained her and supported her decision to serve as a nurse, who had written her letters throughout the war, even when her mother refused to correspond with a daughter who had so thoroughly abandoned propriety. Quinn found her there hours later, still sitting with the letter in her lap. He read it without her having to explain, then pulled her to her feet and held her while she grieved. The next day, he informed his boss that he needed time off and accompanied Elena on the train journey back to Philadelphia for the funeral. Meeting her family was tense. Elena's mother made her disapproval clear, commenting on how her daughter had thrown away every advantage to play nurse and now lived like a common frontier woman in the wilderness. Her two older brothers and their wives were only slightly more welcoming. But Quinn stood beside Elena through it all, his quiet strength giving her the courage to stand firm in her choices. At the funeral, Elena spoke about her father's dedication to medicine and his belief that healing was a calling that transcended gender or social expectations. Several doctors who had studied with her father approached her afterward, shaking her hand and telling her they were impressed by her work. One even offered her a position at a hospital in Philadelphia with a generous salary and living accommodations. On the train ride back to Wyoming, Quinn was quieter than usual. Finally, as they watched the landscape change from green eastern forests to the open plains of the west, he said, "Are you going to take that job?" Elena looked at him in surprise. "Do you want me to?" "I want you to be happy." "If going back to Philadelphia would make you happy, then yes. Philadelphia is not my home anymore. My father was my only real connection there, and he is gone now. My mother has never forgiven me for becoming a doctor, and my brothers think I am an embarrassment to the family name." She took Quinn's hand in hers. "My home is in Laramie with you if you want me there." The relief that washed over Quinn's face was unmistakable. "I want you there more than I have ever wanted anything." "Then that is settled." But Quinn was not quite finished. He shifted in his seat, looking suddenly nervous in a way she had never seen him before. "Elena, I know we have only known each other a few months. I know that might seem too soon. But I also know that life is short and unpredictable, and when you find something worth holding on to, you should not let it go." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold band. "I do not have much to offer, just a cowboy's wages and a lot of rough days ahead. But I love you. I love your strength and your courage and your kindness. I love the way you fight for your patients and the way you are learning to fight for yourself. Will you marry me?" Elena felt tears spring to her eyes, but this time they were good tears, healing tears. "Yes. Yes, Quinn Irving, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her right there in the train car, not caring about the other passengers who smiled or looked away politely. Elena kissed him back and felt something shift inside her chest, like a door opening onto a room full of light. They were married in August in a simple ceremony at the small church in Laramie. The congregation was an eclectic mix of ranch hands, railroad workers, saloon girls, shopkeepers, and patients Elena had treated. Mrs. Peterson cried happy tears. The veterans Quinn had introduced Elena to came and stood as witnesses to the union. The Chinese couple who ran the restaurant provided the wedding feast. Elena wore a simple cream-colored dress, nothing fancy, but Quinn looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman in the world. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Quinn kissed her with such tenderness that Elena felt her heart might burst. They spent their wedding night in a hotel room in Laramie, and for the first time in years, Elena felt truly safe, truly home. Quinn had been saving his wages for years, and with Elena's income from her medical practice, they were able to buy a small piece of land just outside town. It was not much, Just 20 acres with a creek running through it and a view of the mountains in the distance, but it was theirs. They built a house together, working side by side through the hot summer and into the cool autumn. Elena saw patients during the day, and Quinn worked at the ranch, but in the evenings and on Sundays, they hammered boards and mixed mortar and slowly created a home. The house had a large room that Elena could use as a proper medical office, with good light and space for examining patients. It had a bedroom with windows that looked out over the prairie. It had a kitchen with a real stove and a parlor with a fireplace. And it had a porch where they could sit in the evenings and watch the sun set over the grasslands. By their first anniversary, the house was finished, and Elena discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complicated mix of joy and terror. She had helped deliver countless babies, had seen the dangers of childbirth firsthand, but Quinn's steady presence helped calm her fears. "You are going to be an amazing mother," he told her, his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I am scared," she admitted. "What if something goes wrong? What if I cannot protect our child? Then we will face it together, just like everything else." Elena's pregnancy progressed smoothly, though she continued seeing patients almost until the day her water broke. Their son was born on a cold January morning in 1870, after a long and difficult labor that left Elena exhausted but triumphant. Quinn had stayed with her through it all, holding her hand and encouraging her, and when he first held their son, Elena saw tears streaming down his face. "What should we name him?" Quinn asked, his voice thick with emotion. Elena looked at her husband and their newborn son, and she thought about all the names in her journal, all the soldiers she had lost. And she realized that while she would never forget them, she no longer felt crushed beneath their weight. She had learned to carry them differently, to honor them without being destroyed by grief. "Thomas," she said, "after the first soldier I lost, Thomas Quinn Irving." Quinn looked at her with such love that Elena felt it like a physical warmth. "That is perfect." Raising a child on the frontier was not easy, but they managed. Elena reduced her practice hours but continued treating patients, often with young Thomas sleeping in a basket nearby. Quinn had been promoted to foreman at the ranch, which meant better wages and more regular hours. They hired a young woman named Sarah to help with child care and household chores, freeing Elena to focus on her medical work. Thomas was a happy, healthy baby who grew into a curious toddler. Elena watched him explore their small ranch with wonder, chasing chickens and playing in the creek, and felt grateful every single day for this life they had built. The nightmares still came sometimes, the memories of the war still surfaced, but they were manageable now. She had Quinn to hold her when the darkness threatened. She had Thomas to remind her that life continued, that new generations would grow up knowing peace. On summer evenings, when the work was done and Thomas had been put to bed, Elena and Quinn would sit on their porch and talk. About everything and nothing. About their plans to expand the ranch, about patients Elena had seen, about Thomas's latest adventures. Sometimes they would sit in comfortable silence, just existing together. One evening in the summer of 1872, Elena said, "I was thinking about something today." "What is that?" Quinn asked, reaching over to take her hand. "I was thinking about how lost I was when I first came to Laramie, how certain I was that I would carry the weight of those 47 soldiers for the rest of my life. How convinced I was that I did not deserve happiness or peace. And now I understand that healing is not about forgetting. It is not about pretending the pain never happened. It is about learning to carry the weight differently, about accepting help from people who love you." She squeezed his hand. "You helped me set that burden down, Quinn. Not by making me forget, but by teaching me I did not have to carry it alone." Quinn lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. You did the same for me. Before I met you, I was just going through the motions of living. You taught me how to feel again, how to hope for something better. We saved each other. We did. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder and looked out over their land, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. She thought about the journal she kept, still filled with those 47 names, but now also filled with notes about patients she had saved, about Thomas's first words and first steps, about quiet moments of joy with the man she loved. The past was still there, still part of who she was, but it no longer defined her entire existence. 2 years later, Elena gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah Margaret, after the young woman who had become like family to them. Thomas, now 4 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister and appointed himself her protector. Quinn expanded their house to accommodate their growing family, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. Elena's medical practice flourished. She became known throughout the territory as one of the best doctors available, and patients would travel for days to seek her care. She trained several young women who wanted to learn nursing, passing on the knowledge her father had given her. Quinn became a partner in the ranch where he worked, buying into the operation with his savings and Elena's support. They faced hardships, as all frontier families did. Harsh winters that killed livestock, droughts that turned the grasslands brown, illnesses that swept through the community. But they faced these challenges together, and with each obstacle overcome, their bond grew stronger. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Quinn surprised Elena with a gift. He had commissioned a local craftsman to create a wooden box, beautifully carved with intricate designs of prairie flowers and mountains. Inside was a blank journal, identical in size to the one Elena kept with her 47 names. "I thought you might want to start filling this one with different kinds of names," Quinn said. "Patients you have saved, children you have delivered, good memories alongside the difficult ones." Elena held the box and the journal, feeling the weight of them in her hands, and realized it was a weight she could bear. More than that, it was a weight worth carrying. She opened the new journal and wrote the first entry. "Quinn Irving, the cowboy who helped me set my burden down and taught me how to live again." Over the years, she filled that journal with hundreds of names and stories. Patients who recovered against all odds, babies born healthy and strong. Friends made and communities helped. And woven through all of it were notes about her own family, about Thomas and Sarah, and eventually about 2 more children, twin boys born in 1878 when Elena was 36 and Quinn was 40. The veterans group that had formed around Quinn's ranch campfire continued to meet regularly. Some of the original members died as the years passed, but new people joined, not just war veterans but anyone carrying heavy burdens who needed a place to share them. Elena and Quinn hosted gatherings at their ranch, creating a space where people could speak honestly about their struggles and find support. Elena never forgot the names in her original journal. On the anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg each year, she would read all 47 names aloud to Quinn and their children, teaching them about the cost of war and the importance of remembering. But she also showed them the second journal, the one filled with stories of healing and hope, demonstrating that tragedy did not have to be the end of the story. Thomas grew into a young man who wanted to study medicine like his mother. Sarah became a skilled horsewoman who helped Quinn manage their expanding ranch. The twins, Matthew and Marcus, were still young but showed promise of being a handful as they entered their teenage years. In the spring of 1888, 20 years after Elena first arrived in Laramie, she and Quinn took a rare trip away from the ranch. Their children were old enough to manage things for a few days, and Sarah, now married to a good man and living nearby, promised to check in on them. Elena and Quinn rode out to a spot Quinn had discovered years ago, a high meadow with a view that stretched for miles in every direction. They camped under the stars, just the two of them, and talked late into the night the way they had done when they first met. Elena was 46 now, with silver threads in her dark hair and lines around her eyes. Quinn was 48, his hair more gray than brown and his hands gnarled from years of hard work. But when he looked at her, Elena still saw the same love and admiration that had been there from the beginning. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked, lying in Quinn's arms and watching the stars wheel overhead. "Marrying a damaged army nurse with more ghosts than should fit in one person." Quinn laughed, the sound rumbling in his chest. "You are asking me this after 20 years of marriage and 4 children. I am serious. I know I have not always been easy to live with. The nightmares, the days when I could barely function, the times I pushed you away because I was afraid of being hurt." Quinn rolled onto his side to look at her properly. "Elena Irving, you listen to me. You are the strongest, bravest, most incredible woman I have ever known. You survived a war that broke countless others. You built a medical practice in the middle of nowhere and saved hundreds of lives. You raised 4 amazing children. You taught me how to be a better man. I have never regretted a single moment with you, not one." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you so much. I do not think I have told you that enough over the years. You tell me every day. In the way you smile at me over breakfast. In the way you squeeze my hand when you walk past. In the way you curl up against me every night. I have never doubted your love, Elena, not for a second." They made love there under the stars, slow and tender and familiar. 2 people who knew each other's bodies and hearts better than they knew their own. Afterward, lying wrapped in blankets in each other's arms, Elena thought about the young woman she had been when she arrived in Laramie, so broken and lost, convinced she would never find peace. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" "For seeing me when I could not see myself. For helping me understand that I did not have to carry my burdens alone. For loving me even when I could not love myself." Quinn kissed her forehead. "Thank you for letting me in, for trusting me with your pain, for building this life with me." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and when Elena dreamed that night, it was not of battlefields and dying soldiers. She dreamed of their ranch, of their children laughing, of Quinn smiling at her across the dinner table. She dreamed of the life they had created together, built on a foundation of shared pain and mutual healing. The years continued to pass, as years do. Thomas went to medical school in Denver and came back to Laramie to work alongside his mother, eventually taking over much of her practice as Elena's hands grew less steady with age. Sarah and her husband built a house on a corner of Elena and Quinn's land, raising their own children within sight of their grandparents. The twins went into ranching with Quinn, expanding the operation until the Irving Ranch was one of the most successful in the territory. Elena and Quinn grew old together, their bodies wearing down but their love remaining strong. They celebrated their 30th anniversary, then their 40th. They became grandparents many times over, and Elena delighted in delivering several of her own grandchildren, bringing new life into the world with hands that had once only known how to ease death. On a warm evening in the summer of 1898, Elena sat on the porch of the house she and Quinn had built together so many years ago. She was 76 years old now, her hair completely white and her body frail, but her mind remained sharp. Quinn sat beside her, holding her hand the way he had held it for 40 years of marriage. Their children and grandchildren were gathered for a family dinner, the house full of noise and laughter and life. Elena watched them through the window, these beautiful people who existed because she had been brave enough to accept help when Quinn offered it, brave enough to believe that healing was possible. "We did all right, did we not?" she said to Quinn. He squeezed her hand gently. "We did better than all right. We built something beautiful. I still think about them sometimes, the soldiers, the ones I lost. I know you do. But it does not hurt the same way anymore. I can remember them without feeling like I am drowning. I can honor their memory while still living my own life. That is because you learned how to set the burden down, not to abandon it, but to carry it differently." Elena turned to look at her husband, this man who had saved her life just by seeing her, by refusing to let her carry her pain alone. "You gave me that gift. You and everyone else who helped me understand that healing was possible." "We gave each other that gift," Quinn corrected gently. "That is what love does. It does not fix everything, but it makes the hard things bearable." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and crimson. Inside the house, their family laughed and told stories, creating new memories to add to the collection. And Elena, who had once believed she would be crushed beneath the weight of her past, realized she had been wrong. The past was still there, would always be there, but it no longer defined her. She was not just a nurse who had lost 47 soldiers. She was a doctor, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a friend, a teacher, a healer. She was Elena Irving, and her story was still being written. Quinn died peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1900 at the age of 60. Elena held his hand as he slipped away, much as she had held the hands of so many soldiers decades before, but this time she was not helpless. She was able to say goodbye, to tell him one more time how much she loved him, to thank him for the life they had shared. It was still painful, the loss still carved out a piece of her heart, but she did not shatter. She grieved deeply and honestly, supported by her children and grandchildren who rallied around her. She lived another 4 years, staying active and engaged with her community until the very end. She continued to see patients occasionally, though Thomas handled most of the medical work by then. She spent time with her grandchildren, teaching them about plants and medicine and the importance of kindness. She wrote in her journals, both of them now, recording her memories and the lessons she had learned. On the night before she died, Elena gathered her children around her bed. She gave Thomas her medical journals, thousands of pages documenting treatments and techniques. She gave Sarah the family Bible and the deed to the ranch. She gave the twins Quinn's pocket watch and favorite saddle, and she gave all of them the 2 journals that had defined so much of her life. "Keep these," she told them. "The first one contains the names of the soldiers I lost during the war. The second contains the names of people I helped save, of patients who recovered, of the beautiful things that happened after I learned to set down my burden. Both journals are important. Both are true. Our lives contain tragedy and joy, pain and healing, loss and love. Do not try to have just one without the other. Learn to carry them both." Elena died on a spring morning in 1904, surrounded by her family, at peace with herself and the life she had lived. She was buried next to Quinn on a hill overlooking their ranch, and her gravestone read, "Elena Irving, doctor and healer, beloved wife and mother, 1842–1904. She carried the weight with courage and grace." At her funeral, Thomas read the 47 names from his mother's first journal, honoring the soldiers she had never forgotten. Then Sarah read entries from the second journal, stories of healing and hope, and the family Elena had built with Quinn. And everyone who gathered to remember Elena understood that she had been a woman who knew profound loss, but refused to let it destroy her. She had been brave enough to accept help, wise enough to share her burdens, and strong enough to build a life full of love despite the weight she carried. The ranch continued to thrive under the management of Elena and Quinn's descendants. The medical practice Thomas took over grew into a small hospital, serving communities throughout the region. And the journals were preserved and passed down through generations, a testament to one woman's journey from crushing grief to hard-won peace, made possible by a cowboy who saw her pain and refused to let her face it alone. Their love story became legend in Laramie, told and retold, a reminder that healing was possible, that burdens shared were burdens lightened, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was reach out and accept a helping hand.